in St. John's community and guests. For our guest speakers in the room and our students, we are grateful to have you in what part of an elevated attempt of improving your consciousness. This week has been filled with a lot of challenges, both in perspective and otherwise, but we are anxious to start, I think, the capstone of our day today. To introduce our guest speaker, I'd like to call up Mr. Dylan Bagansky to get us started and call to order.
Through his first several years in office, Mayor Kapsakevich has prioritized working alongside the people facing challenges in this region. Among his top goals are in creating a regional water system, restoring discipline in the city's budget, and improvising educational opportunities for Toledo's youngest residents. It is no surprise that he has offered to join us today. After his undergraduate from Marquette University, a Jesuit school, and his master's degree from the University of Michigan, Mayor Kapsakevich was soon elected to City Council in 1999, holding the distinction of being the youngest official named to Toledo's legislative body at 26. Since then, and in varying capacities in city government, Kapsakevich's role as mayor led him to fighting the algal blooms in Lake Erie, emerging as a national leader in efforts preventing pollution in waterways and for promoting responsible environmental practices. As SJJ sought to create a community-wide event, we look to host the multitude of civic leaders, those representing public offices in our state, and impassioned professionals who can provide a holistic lens for our topic. While Toledo is immersed in rich biodiversity, it is also at the center of dynamic environmental challenges facing the region. We are grateful and honored to host Mayor Kapsakevich, who can speak about Toledo's role in shaping new initiatives that reflect broader awareness and more intentional community living. Please welcome the Mayor of Toledo, Mr. Wade Kapsakevich.
Okay, I've been applauded enough to know that that is an unnatural level of applauding. And so that there was some sarcasm there, but I remember being your age, so I'll allow it. I just learned that I went to high school and graduated in the same graduating class as your uncle. So I'm not sure if they call you Bugs. Okay, well, good. All right, so that's what we called your uncle. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today to speak to speak to all of you. And I know this is the end of a week of discussion and conversation, not just about the environment and sustainability and solar power and algal blooms and all those things that I'm sure you talked about, but a week talking about the importance of civic engagement, why this matters, why you're here, what we're doing. So to begin, I'd like to ask for a show of hands. How many people ate breakfast today? Good. Of those who ate breakfast, how many ate, cereal, oatmeal, something in the cereal oatmeal family? All right. What's your name? Jed? Jack. Okay, all right. By the way, I wanted to be at the podium, but they insisted I do the Jerry Springer thing. Well, you don't even know who Jerry Springer is, right? I just dated myself. At any rate, Jack had cereal, right? What kind of cereal? Cracklin' Oat Bran. Good. Did you happen to enjoy the bites of rodent hair and insect carcasses that you ate? And everyone here, it was good, it probably gave you some protein you didn't know you were getting. It's not just Jack, it's everyone who raised his or her hand saying that they had oatmeal or cereal or anything like that. Because the point is, not only is there rodent hair and insect carcasses in every bite you took this morning, that's not the point. The point is, there is a government allowed amount of rodent hair and insect carcasses. There is. It's not that it's snuck in there accidentally. It is that the folks that you elected to represent you have decided that maybe there is such a thing as too much rodent hair and insect carcasses, but there is an allowable amount. So we'll let the citizens of this country consume the allowable amount, and they'll never know it. Now, when you think about it, now you're thinking about yourself and your perspective as an eater of oatmeal. And this doesn't sound very fun to you right now, or an eater of Cheerios or whatever. I'm obviously an expert eater. But think about it from the perspective of Procter & Gamble, who makes soup, or General Mills, who makes cereal. Think about it from the perspective of someone whose business it is to mass produce cereal to the people of the world. They're not bad people, okay? They're trying to do a good thing. They're trying to keep us healthy and fed. They're also trying to make a profit. There's nothing wrong with that. When you think of what it takes to produce Cheerios, how can there not be some rodent hairs and insect carcasses in their product? Think about how these things are shipped. We're talking about oats, all right, and grains. These things are transported from here to there in rail, box cars and train warehouse, things, technical term. And that is if they don't sail across the ocean in a big ocean freighter. In fact, from my office, I see, probably once a week. Most of the commerce we get in our port comes from the Great Lakes, but we get probably 50 ships a year that come from Poland or, Russia, South Africa, or wherever, and they're going to the grain mills and they're loading in and loading out. And when you think about if you just think about that process, how can there not be a bug in that ship that sailed from Toledo from Poland? Okay, how could there not be? How could there not be a little mouse running around doing his thing? So you can understand that doesn't make them bad people, but just the mere act of producing this good, you're going to get some rodent hairs and insect carcasses. Not even that is the point I'm trying to make. Here's the point I'm trying to make. My guess is you didn't know that there was a government allowable amount of rodent hair and insect carcasses in your breakfast this morning. Maybe you did, but you probably didn't. You didn't know that. Do you know who did know that? The CEO of General Mills, the CEO of Procter & Gamble, and the lobbyists who work for them. Do you know why they know it? Because they are the ones who helped write the bill in Congress that established whatever the heck the allowable amount of rodent hair and insect carcasses is. Because you could eliminate it. You could produce a product that contains no rodent hairs and insect carcasses. You could do it. It would just involve an expense that Procter & Gamble and General Mills and the rest of them don't want to bear. I'm sure there's scrubbers that you could buy or inspectors or God knows, who knows, I don't know. But they kind of don't want to bear that expense because it's going to make their product more expensive. And instead of buying Cracklin' Oats or whatever Jack ate, you'll buy super Cracklin' Oats from China that doesn't care how many rodent hairs and insect carcasses, so they want to keep their costs down. They are paying attention. They are awake. They know how this works. They know that there's an agriculture appropriation bill that Congress passes every year that is 70 bazillion pages long, and it's passed at 2:30 in the morning. And even after it's passed, the regulations that govern that appropriations bill take place at a different building in Washington, at a different meeting in some dreary conference room that you couldn't possibly identify even if I pointed to it. But they know where it is, and their lobbyists know where it is. And so when it came time to pass that bill and to establish whatever the heck the allowable amount of rodent hair and insect carcasses is, they were there. They were making their case. They were testifying. They were introducing reports to say, oh, no, yeah. Boy, if you make us eliminate every single mouse hair, my God, General Mills is going to close. And that's the biggest employer in Minneapolis. Or Procter & Gamble is going to close. That's the 7th largest employer in Ohio. And you're going to put us out of business, and good American jobs are going to be at risk and everyone's going to buy their Cheerios from China or something like that. And those congressmen said, oh, wow, man, that would be terrible. Okay, fine. What do you think the allowable amount of rodent hair and insect carcasses is? I don't know, a bazillion parts per trillion, a gazillion. Whatever it is, I don't care. They put that amount in, and unknowingly, Jack ate a bunch of rodent hair and insect carcasses this morning. So we know what the makers of Cheerios and Campbell's Soup and all those, we know what they were doing last year when the appropriation bill passed. What were you doing? Were you there? Did you call your congressman and say, I don't know, all else being equal, I'd rather not eat any insect hair and rodent carcasses this morning? Vote no on that bill. Did you? Did you show up in that conference room at 2:30 in the morning when they passed that bill? No. Did you go to the regulatory hearing where the rules were placed? No. And I'm not even blaming you. Do you know why? Because you got a life to lead, right? You got to study for exams. You got girlfriends or boyfriends, because I see we are represented on all sides of the aisle here today. You got chores to do. You got parents who are giving you a hard time. You got the game to go to tonight, whatever it is. You're living your life, and that's okay. That's cool. That's what you should be doing, okay? No one's blaming anyone here. But just understand that decisions are made by those people who show up. Now, that's an interesting quote. Some people think it's Benjamin Franklin. Some people think it's Harry Truman. Still others think it's Woody Allen. I don't know who said it, but I know it's true. Decisions are made by those who show up. The value of what you are doing this week is that you are showing up. Doesn't mean you're going to get what you want. Doesn't mean you're still not going to end up eating insect hair and rodent carcasses, but it is the first step to living in a real, flourishing democracy where your voice can be heard. I have always believed, I'm 47 years old, I believe that I live in the greatest country in the world and that America is great. And I don't think America's been great for 2 years. It's been great for 47 years. And it'll be great for the next 47 years. It's not a political statement. It's what I believe. I believe that that is the case, not because we are perfect. We're not perfect. We're a bunch of human beings. But it is the case because we have the ability to change. We have the ability to evolve. We have the ability to take something we don't like and to tweak it. So sometimes we might elect the wrong person, a doofus mayor, all right? A doofus governor, a doofus president, whatever. But you know what? Are we doomed forever to have to deal with that? No. We'll vote him out next time or vote her out next time. That is the beauty of our system. But it only works when we're paying attention, when we are awake, when we care. The reason we matter is because we have been doing this longer than anyone else. You know, our Constitution in this country, ratified in 1789, is the oldest written document that organizes government in the world, in the history of the world. What is that, 230 years? Is that right? 240 years, 30, 40 years? That is as old a document that governs people as exists in the world. Now you might say Magna Carta, blah, blah, it's not really a constitution. Ours is the oldest. For bonus points, I think Norway is next. It might be 1814. This is the problem when I don't use notes. I think the Netherlands might be next. They might be third. I don't know. It's getting murky. I know this. The 10th oldest constitution in the world is Australia, and theirs passed in 1901. How many countries are there on the face of the planet? 180, maybe? 200? I don't know. The point is, let's say there's 180. 170 of them, then, have constitutions that are just a little more than 100 years old, that are brand new. The oldest one that survives is ours. The world does look to us. It does. it looks to us to decide how to do this. How do we do this? How do we govern ourselves? How do we resolve our differences peacefully and rationally and not just based on who has the largest tank or who happens to be a man or who happens to worship God in just the correct way? Most, not much, most of the world still makes their decisions that way. So you better have the largest tank or you're in trouble. We don't do that. And the rest of the world looks to us for guidance. You are all bright students, no matter where you go to school. I don't know if you have yet read The Republic by Plato, but you may at some point. Remember what Plato said. Democracy isn't the best way to govern human affairs. It ain't. What is? Has anyone read it? Has anyone ever heard of Plato? Okay. There was this long ago time called ancient Greece, trust me. Okay. What he said was the best way to govern human affairs is through a benevolent dictator, a benevolent king. That's the best way to do it. Problem is there never has been such a person, and there never will be such a person. Everyone starts out as a benevolent king, a benevolent dictator, and pretty soon they're Stalin. You might start out saying, hey, I'm the benevolent person, and then in a couple of weeks I'll be Mussolini. That's human nature. So what Plato said is, the best way to govern ourselves doesn't work. So I guess we'll have to settle for the second best way to govern ourselves, and that's democracy. But democracy only works if we're all playing. So we have two problems, I think. Remember, we are the best country. We really are. That's not boosterism or, some song on whatever. It's real. But it's not because we're perfect. It's because we have the ability to strive for perfection, to make a better union, a more perfect union. That's why it matters. But we got two problems. I think we have two problems. One, not everyone is participating. Not everyone is involved, and I'm not giving you a hard time, on the question of rodent hairs and insect carcasses. You are not participating, and neither am I, because I don't know how many allowable rodent hairs and insect carcasses there are either, but I know there's an amount. Someone's paying attention. Someone wrote that regulation. Decisions are made by those who show up. So the first big problem is not everyone is showing up. And when not everyone shows up, things happen that we might not like, including mouse hairs in our Cheerios or algal blooms in our lake. That's one problem. Problem number two is that unfortunately, we live in a time where truth is often we live in a time where people can't agree on what is even truthful, all right? And that is a discussion, I think, for another time and maybe another class, but it is. The problems we face are hard enough to solve, even if we could agree that they exist. I'm certain sometime this week you probably talked about climate change and what that means and what caused it and whatever. Even if we could agree that climate change existed and was caused by A, B, and C factors, that would still be hard to fix. Well, geez, how do we do it? How do we cut down on, man-made emissions and this and this? I don't know. Do we tax this? Do we do that? What do we do for coal plants? I mean, that's hard. That's hard stuff, even if we agreed on the truth. But we live in a country where you got half the country that doesn't even believe that it's a real thing. Fake news. Okay, that's cool. It means that what you did this week matters. Stripping aside the politics and the silliness and the partisanship, you actually engaged in these things called facts. They're amazing things, and they really exist. The first step to creating that more perfect union isn't just that we all have to participate, but that we have to go to the game with some truth, that truth matters and facts matter. And so when you arm yourself with truth and facts, and when you decide to participate, then we have a chance. Now we're on to something. So the value of what you have done leading up to today, you are attacking two of the problems that kind of hold us back in our American democracy. One, you actually dare to dream, decided to consume some actual facts. Not spin, not punditry, not BS, but actual fact. Let's check that box. I think that's what this week has been about. The second step is engagement. And I think, and I hope, that you will take the facts that you have obtained this week and turn that into paying attention, advocating, getting ticked off when your elected officials allow rodent hairs in your Cheerios. Now, we're not talking about nutrition, okay? We're not. That's the last time I'll talk about rodent hairs and insect carcasses. Let's talk about what the theme of this week is, the environment. There are a lot of things I could talk about from the perspective of the city, and we're doing all of them. We're putting solar panels on capped landfills. It's a tricky thing for us. Toledo is a city, just like any other city, that wants economic development. In fact, if you could give me another week, well, actually I see Sean back there, so I got to be careful because I almost broke some news and I'm not going to do it. It's close. Had he not been there, I would have told. How about this? Pay attention to Southwick. Something good's coming to Southwick. We'll say that, okay? So, but here's the point. No. All right. And actually, I'm good at this. I looked around. None of you were recording me. Had Sean not been here, I would have told you what it was going to be and when I was going to announce it. But for now, we're just going to whet your appetite. Forget about it. The point is this. Cities like Toledo are desperate for economic development. We don't have a lot of land. We're kind of landlocked. If we got super creative, the most amount of parcels that we could cobble together or acres might be 200 acres. This is one of the reasons Southwick is such a challenge, which is why my brain went there, but I'm going to stop that before I blow it. So the point is, we have environmental goals as a city. We want to check certain boxes, but we don't want to sacrifice precious land that could go to economic development. So one of the, I would say, creative things that we have done in that space, we all want solar panels. We know how good that is. We don't want to sacrifice, don't tell me I'm at my 5 minutes yet. Okay, good. Am I? Close to 5? Okay. 7 minutes. We don't want to sacrifice precious land that could be turned into job creation by building a solar field. Okay. No one's going to develop anything on a landfill. We'll put our solar panels on landfills. And we're doing it, and it's wonderful. Over the last 20 years, we have built 150 million gallons of stormwater tanks underneath our parks and streets. This is something that began before you were born, but now it prevents the amount of runoff into the river and lake. So we have done our part to sort of cut down on these algal blooms. So we're doing all these things. But still, we live in the one city in North America that has had its water supply shut down. And how old are you here, 17 or so? So when you were 11 or 12, you may remember that weekend in August when the drinking water for 500,000 people was turned off. We're the only city that's ever happened, okay? Why? It is because overwhelmingly agricultural runoff has spilled into the western basin of Lake Erie and into the rivers and streams itself, creating these algal blooms, these toxic algal blooms. I am not a scientist, but I can tell you that there is something about the mixture of these agricultural chemicals and warm water that creates algal blooms. So part of our problem is something that we can't help. We live on the shallowest end of the shallowest Great Lake. There are some parts of the Great Lakes, Lake Superior, up in Lake Huron, where it's 1,000 feet deep, 1,200 feet deep, 1,400 feet deep. Even Lake Erie, if you go over near Buffalo and Cleveland, 800 feet deep, 900 feet deep. We live on the shallowest end of the shallowest lake. You know how deep it is off our shores? 20 feet, all right? 30 feet, 40 feet. And what does that mean? It means that it heats up more quickly. We don't get these algal blooms in the winter. We get them like clockwork every September or so, August, September, when it gets hot, because it's easier and faster and quicker to heat up a shallow body of water. Truth be told, I'm sure there's just as much agricultural runoff from the agricultural community in Duluth, Minnesota, or Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or Green Bay, or all these other cities around all these other Great Lakes. But the problem is those chemicals, those agricultural chemicals, are running off into colder, deeper, harder to heat bodies of water. So part of this is just bad luck. We live on the shallowest end of the shallowest Great Lake, and so it heats up faster than it does everywhere else. Can't do anything about that. But we can do something about the other part, because the agricultural runoff, when it spills into warm water, creates toxic algal blooms. Everyone knows who is causing this problem. Everyone. The director of the Ohio EPA sat in my office and said, look, you don't have to convince me. I know who's causing this problem. It is farmers and other agricultural interests. Not 100% of the problem, but 92% of it. 92% of the problem is caused by agricultural runoff. You know who else believes that and understands it? The governor and the legislature and every government official from here to Washington, D.C. The question has been asked and answered, all right? Everyone knows what causes the algal blooms. There's no mystery. We don't have to do any more studies. It's been decided, okay? That's good news, great. 5 years later, 5 years after the crisis, the level of toxicity in our lake is higher than it was when the crisis began. And that is despite the fact that the current governor has put together a plan of $200 million of incentives to encourage agricultural businesses to emit less pollution. The previous governor spent $3 billion. So since the crisis, we have already spent $3 billion on programs that were alleged to be cutting the problem down. And the new governor is going to spend another $200 million. That's great. These voluntary incentives, though, they're not working. We talk about the carrot and the stick. There's an awful lot of carrot. There's $3 billion of carrots, and it hasn't moved the needle at all. In fact, the problem is getting worse. And why is that? Because there is no stick. There's no regulation. There's no restriction. Everything that they have done have been polite suggestions, voluntary begging. Please try to do better. We'll give you a little grant if you do better, but nothing meaningful. What is the point of what I just said? Why? Why hasn't the problem been solved? Everyone knows what the problem is. Not one person would disagree the problem's being caused by agricultural runoff. Everyone agrees. The farmers agree. Everyone knows the problem. The politicians in Columbus have spent over $3 billion to attack the problem, and the problem has gotten worse. Why? Well, it's because all the money in the world isn't going to solve the problem when there's no stick. If you go all carrot and no stick, the farmers would say, hey, that's great money, thanks. I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. It's fine. Why won't the legislature regulate the people who are poisoning our water? Why? Because the farmers don't want them to. And the farmers vote. And the farmers vote for the folks who are in charge in Columbus. The people who live in cities like Toledo tend to not vote for the people who are in charge in Columbus. It's that simple. It's no more complicated than that. The reason the state legislature is doing nothing to solve the problem. And when I say nothing, I mean nothing. The problem's gotten worse. Is because the people who voted them into office don't want them to. Why? Because it would drive up the cost of their business, just like it would drive up the cost of General Mills to eliminate all the rodent hairs. So just like government has allowed a certain amount of rodent hair and insect carcasses because the people paying attention said, you better do this or my business is, you're putting me out of business, and you guys are sleeping. The reason the problem in Lake Erie has gotten worse is because the folks who are voting them into office have said, oh, no, don't regulate us. If you regulate us, we're going to go out of business. And the food's, the price of soybeans are going to be so high, and we're going to, okay, there's some truth to that. And what are we doing? And that's fine. Then just don't complain when our water turns poisonous every September. This will continue to happen until you take the knowledge you gained this week, combine it with the activism that causes you to get involved, and to put your boot in the rear end of the governor and the legislature and the folks who are making this decision. Right now, you're not doing that. You know who is? The agricultural community causing the problem. They know they're causing the problem, and they are communicating with the regulators and telling them, no. And you know what we're doing? We're not communicating with them. So yeah, is our lake being poisoned? Yeah. Do we know who's doing it? Yeah. Is our state government doing anything to prevent it? No. Why? Because they're only hearing from the people who would lose if some meaningful regulations were put on it. Those folks down in Columbus, they don't want to do that. They'd just as soon get reelected next time. So they're going to continue to throw money down the toilet and not impose any meaningful regulations because the people who voted for them don't want it. If you disagree with that outcome, the only way to fix this is to get involved, is to complain and to organize and to rabble-rouse and to make this your issue. The farmers have, and that's why we drink poisonous water every year. Good for them. They have organized and they have gotten what they wanted. Who suffers? You. What are you doing about it? Up until this week, maybe nothing. Hopefully coming out of this week, you will take action and participate in the democracy that we have been given. So, I'm probably over time, but I hope I hit many of the points I was supposed to. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity. Good luck. I don't care.